My father always said that kindness isn't weakness. It's just quieter than cruelty. I believed him. I was naive enough to think that mattered. My name is Harper Lowell, and this is the story of how I learned that lesson the hard way. It started on a Tuesday in September in a conference room that smelled like expensive coffee and ambition. The Bennett and Company conference room was all glass and gloss, with the city skyline gleaming behind Cole Bennett like it was built to serve as his backdrop. Everything about him was designed to intimidate: the tailored suit, the Rolex, that half smile that never reached his eyes. I was halfway through presenting the quarterly projections when my phone buzzed. Just one soft vibration, but somehow it sliced through the room's polished silence like a knife. My father's name glowed across the screen. Dad. Harper. Cole's voice cut through my hesitation. It was smooth and cold, the kind of voice that smiled without warmth. We don't take personal calls in presentations. You know that. My throat tightened. It's my father. He's in the hospital. Please, Cole tilted his head, his expression flat and calculating. Then step out, but do it quietly. Don't disrupt the team. Every pair of eyes followed me as I left, like I'd committed a sin. In the hallway, my hands were shaking as I answered the call. Dad's voice was faint, breaking between breaths. Honey, they're moving me into surgery. Don't worry about me. I just wanted to hear your voice. Something inside me cracked wide open. Dad, I'll be there. I'm leaving now. I ran back into the conference room, breathless. Cole, I need to take a few days. He's in critical condition. He didn't look up from his notes. You've already taken personal time this quarter, haven't you? It was for his tests, I whispered. This is different. This is. Harper. He finally raised his gaze, eyes sharp as broken glass. We all have parents. We all have responsibilities. But this company runs on consistency, not emotion. I stared at him, unable to breathe. Are you saying I can't go? He leaned back, that half smirk forming, the one that made everyone in the office both fear and flatter him. Do what you have to do, Harper. But understand, actions have consequences. The words burned like acid. I left anyway. 3 days later, Dad's surgery was barely successful. I returned to work exhausted and hollow, clutching a lukewarm coffee like a lifeline. When I entered the office, a strange hush fell. Conversations dipped. People avoided my eyes. Cole was already standing by the glass wall of his office, flanked by Elise, the department's golden girl. She was always smiling too brightly, always laughing too loudly at his jokes, the kind of person who'd learned that flattery was currency. He called me in. Harper, he began, hands in his pockets, like this was casual, like he wasn't about to ruin my life. We had to make some tough calls while you were away. Your role's been reassigned. My heart stuttered. Reassigned. Elise will be taking over the client accounts, he said smoothly. You'll be supporting her from now on. Fewer hours, less stress. I think it's best, given your circumstances. I blinked at him, the room spinning. You're demoting me? Don't make it dramatic, he said quietly. This is me being compassionate. Elise's sympathetic smile made my stomach twist. I know this must be hard for you, she murmured, placing a manicured hand on my arm like she was comforting a child. Cole watched me, his gaze steady, unreadable, as if waiting for me to break. And I did. Not out loud. Not in tears. But something inside me collapsed, quietly and completely. Go settle into your new desk, Harper, he dismissed me. Elise will fill you in. As I walked out, the laughter outside felt louder, sharper. Someone whispered, Did you hear? She couldn't handle it. I kept walking. My legs were shaking, but my face didn't show it. Not yet. By the end of that week, I was invisible. The whispers followed me everywhere. Not cruel enough to be direct, but heavy enough to crush. Elise sat at my old desk now, her laughter carrying through the glass walls. Cole's office door stayed open for her, where mine had always been closed. When she passed me papers, she'd lower her voice and say things like, "Cole wants this by end of day, sweetheart," or "He's really trying to be patient with you." Patient, as if I was a problem he was learning to tolerate. I caught glimpses of them through the window reflections. Elise leaning close, touching his arm, the way he smiled down at her like she was the only person in the world who mattered. And still, he found time to remind me of my place. One afternoon, he hovered behind my chair, his tone silky and deliberate. "Harper, if you want to rebuild trust, try showing initiative. Emotional people often overcompensate by working harder." I froze. He smiled faintly, satisfied, and walked away. Every single day, he found new ways to humiliate me without ever raising his voice. That's what made him dangerous. He never yelled. He just smiled. And somehow, that smile was more cutting than any scream. At night, I came home to silence. The apartment was small, one bedroom, one flickering lamp in the corner, the air still thick with disinfectant from when my father had been there recovering. His old blanket lay folded on the couch, the faint scent of his cologne fading with each passing day. I'd sit at the table, surrounded by unpaid hospital bills and the sound of my own heartbeat, sometimes replaying his last voicemail over and over. "You've done enough for everyone, sweetheart. When will someone do right by you?" It broke me every time. I used to believe that hard work earned respect, that loyalty mattered, that if you gave your all, people would see your worth. But Cole Bennett had shown me the truth. In his world, loyalty was weakness. Compassion was a liability. I pressed my forehead against the cool window pane, staring at the city lights below. Somewhere out there, he was probably drinking champagne with Elise, celebrating numbers that used to be mine. And I was here, forgotten, invisible, mourning a man who gave me everything while working for one who took it all away. The morning of my father's funeral, I was at my desk. Cole had forgotten to approve my leave request. "We're short-staffed," he said, his voice dripping false concern. "I need you here. You can go later." By noon, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my coat and left without asking again. Rain soaked through my blouse as I ran to the church, shoes slipping, mascara streaking down my face. By the time I arrived, the priest had already spoken the final words. The guests were leaving, umbrellas blooming like dark flowers against the gray sky. I saw the casket being lowered, the wet earth swallowing a hole. I dropped to my knees in the mud, whispering apologies through trembling lips. "I'm sorry, Dad. I tried. I really tried." The world blurred through tears and rain. My hands clenched into fists, nails digging into my palms until I felt the sting of blood. That night, when I got home, there was an email waiting. From Cole. Subject: attendance policy. Moving forward, please ensure personal matters are handled outside business hours. We can't afford further disruptions. No condolences. No humanity. Just control. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned, then whispered to the empty room, "You'll regret this, Cole. I swear you will." The wind howled outside, and somewhere deep inside me a fire began to burn. A week later, I was sent to deliver a quarterly report to a downtown address I didn't recognize. When I arrived, the receptionist led me into a study lined with old books and family photographs, the kind of space that smelled like leather, time, and whiskey. And there he was, Arthur Bennett, Cole's father, older, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. He stood by the window, holding the report like he already knew what it contained. "You're Harper Lowell," he said. Not asked. Stated. "Yes, sir," I replied softly. He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Sit." As I sat, his gaze didn't leave my face. "You worked with my son for how long?" 6 years, I said. 6 years, he repeated thoughtfully, like he was turning the number over in his hands, examining it. "And now you're an assistant again." The question cut deep. I nodded once. He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. I've seen your reports, Harper. They were the best this company ever had. Cole doesn't realize what he's lost, but I do. Tears pricked my eyes. I blinked hard, unable to speak. He leaned back, eyes narrowing slightly. Tell me something. Why do you still work for him? I didn't have an answer. Maybe I'd been too afraid to start over. Maybe part of me still wanted Cole to see my worth, to realize he'd made a terrible mistake. Maybe I was just broken enough to believe I deserved what he was doing to me. Arthur's expression softened, a genuine kindness that I hadn't seen in months. You remind me of your father. Quiet strength. He must have been a good man. How did he know about my father? But then I understood. Arthur wasn't just making conversation. He knew. He'd done his research. And something in that moment, I realized Arthur Bennett wasn't just Cole's father. He was about to become the reason Cole finally faced consequences. From that day forward, I noticed subtle changes. Arthur began showing up at the office unannounced. He'd ask to see reports, review figures, and he always requested mine specifically. Cole hated it. Why is he suddenly interested in you? He snapped one afternoon, pacing behind his desk like a caged animal. What did you say to him? Nothing, I said, calm and careful. He asked for the reports. I gave them to him. He laughed sharply. Don't play innocent. My father has always had a soft spot for fragile types. Fragile. That word again. He wanted to provoke me, to make me react so he could call me unstable again. But I didn't give him the satisfaction. I stood, straightened my blouse, and said softly, if you're that threatened by your father's interest in my work, maybe it's not me you should be worried about. His eyes darkened. Watch your tone. I smiled faintly, just like he used to. I learned from the best. As I walked out, my hands were trembling, but not from fear. For the first time, I felt the balance shift. The cracks in his glass-perfect world were starting to show. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, sorting through a box of my father's things. Old letters, his watch, his photograph with me at age 6, my tiny hands covered in paint, his smile bright and proud. In the bottom of the box, I found an envelope addressed to me in his handwriting, dated 2 weeks before he passed. Inside, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't say it out loud. Harper, don't let people like him decide your worth. I've seen how hard you fight for others. One day you'll fight for yourself. Don't be afraid to start over. I sat there for hours, the words blurring as tears soaked the page. Outside, thunder rolled across the city, low and distant like a warning. For the first time since the demotion, I didn't feel small. I felt angry, righteously, quietly angry. I whispered to the empty room, I'm not done. Not yet. The next evening, I stayed at the office after everyone left. The building was quiet, just the hum of servers and distant traffic. My heart was pounding as I slipped into Cole's office. His computer was on. His arrogance always left cracks. I wasn't planning to snoop. Not really. But when I saw a folder titled Private Accounts, Merge Drafts, curiosity pulled at me like a riptide. Inside were numbers that didn't make sense. Money being transferred quietly into dummy consultancies, under fake names, under his control. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just unethical. This was corporate theft. Cole had been using my spreadsheets, my data reports, my projections to launder funds without my even realizing it. I was the perfect scapegoat, the loyal assistant who always signed whatever he placed in front of her. My hands trembled as I photographed each document with my phone. One page slipped from my fingers and floated to the carpet. I crouched to pick it up and froze. Cole's reflection stared back at me in the window. Working late, Harper. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs. He smiled that serpent smile, slow and cruel. You never know when to stop trying to prove yourself. That's what I always liked about you, until it became desperate. He leaned closer, his cologne thick and suffocating. Go home. You look pathetic when you try too hard. When he left, I stood trembling, but smiling faintly, because for the first time I saw him clearly. He wasn't a genius. He was a coward in a suit made of lies. The next morning, Arthur invited me into his home. His townhouse was warm and elegant, filled with the gentle hum of classical music and the aroma of sandalwood tea. He poured me a cup, chamomile with honey, and sat across from me, his weathered hands folded thoughtfully. "You look like you haven't slept," he said. I hesitated, my heart racing. "Mr. Bennet, I found something. Something that could hurt the company. Something that hurts your son." He didn't ask what it was. He only watched me, his face unreadable, but his eyes infinitely kind. "Then you'll need to be careful," he murmured. "My son, he doesn't take well to losing control." That sentence hung in the air, like a confession. Arthur knew. He wasn't blind to who Cole was. He was simply too weary to stop him. Until now. I pulled out my phone and showed him the photographs. His face didn't change, but his hands trembled slightly as he took the device. "Document everything," he said quietly, his voice heavy with something I couldn't name. Regret, maybe. Or responsibility. "Let the truth speak when the time comes." "Can you do that?" "Yes," I whispered. For the first time in weeks, my shoulders eased. I wasn't alone anymore. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked methodically. I accessed Cole's emails through his temporary access credentials that he'd given me months ago for calendar management. I printed copies of his offshore account transfers. I documented the dates, the amounts, the shell companies. I even collected statements from other employees who'd noticed discrepancies, people who were afraid to speak up but willing to talk to me quietly in the break room. By night, I spoke softly to my father's photograph. "I'll make it right, Dad. I promise." The wind rustled the papers like a whisper of approval. I outlined my plan with precision. Secure proof of Cole's embezzlement. Collect witness statements quietly. Build a timeline linking his fraud to company losses. Send the evidence directly to the board with Arthur's silent backing. It wasn't revenge yet. It was preparation. The kind of revenge that would take time, months even, but when it came, it would not just ruin Cole's career. It would strip him of everything he'd used to define himself. Power, admiration, control. And when he finally fell, I decided I wouldn't scream or gloat. I'd just watch, calmly, the way he once watched me break. The office had changed. It wasn't the decor or the lighting, it was Cole. He had started smiling too much, a little too brightly, as if trying to convince the world, and himself, that everything was under control. His charm was a weapon, polished to perfection, but beginning to rust beneath the surface. I noticed the small things. The faint tremor in his hand when he signed contracts. The new assistant who avoided his gaze. The way he lingered near my desk, pretending to check documents just to assert his dominance. "I miss when you used to bring me coffee," he said one morning, his voice dripping false nostalgia. "You used to care about making things right." I kept my eyes on the report. "You demoted me, remember? Coffee duty isn't in my job description anymore." He leaned closer, the warmth of his breath laced with arrogance. "You always take things so personally, Harper. It's exhausting. Maybe that's why you're still stuck." He smiled, the kind that once made me doubt myself, question my own worth. But not anymore, because I had something he didn't. Knowledge. Proof. Control. I looked up slowly, meeting his gaze steady and unflinching. "Careful, Cole. You're starting to sound desperate." His smile faltered just for a second, but it was enough to make my heart race with something that felt like triumph. The balance of power had shifted. He just didn't know it yet. Whispers began to ripple through the office. Quiet rumors, like smoke curling under a locked door. Cole had made an accounting error. A client's funds had temporarily vanished. The board had begun asking questions. I played my part perfectly, calm, polite, helpful. I was still the loyal assistant, still invisible enough to be underestimated. But behind every friendly smile, I planted seeds of truth. During lunch breaks, I left photocopies of Cole's secret transfers in executive mail slots. Anonymous but damning. At night, I emailed documents to Arthur using the encrypted address he'd given me. The tension in the office thickened like humidity before a storm. Cole barked at staff. He drank more. His once perfect charm cracked into something brittle and erratic. Elise started keeping her distance, sensing the shift in the wind. One evening, as we shared an elevator ride, Cole turned to me. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" I blinked, feigning confusion. "Enjoying what?" "Watching me clean up other people's mistakes." His voice was a hiss, low and dangerous. "You've always wanted to be the hero, Harper. The saint who suffers quietly while everyone else gets the credit." My lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "You should be careful, Cole. Projection is a sign of guilt." He stared at me, momentarily speechless. The elevator chimed, and I stepped out first, leaving the faint scent of jasmine perfume in my wake, like victory disguised as grace. Cole's birthday gala was held at the downtown rooftop bar. The entire office was invited, including me, though I was expected to blend in quietly. He arrived late, of course, soaking in the applause like it was oxygen. His new fiancée, a sleek and calculating woman named Vanessa, hung off his arm like jewelry. I would later learn she had no idea about his crimes. I stood in the corner, holding a glass of water, wearing an emerald gown that caught the light like I'd dragged a piece of the ocean in with me. Heads turned. Whispers followed. For once, I didn't shrink. When he finally noticed me, his eyes tightened, just slightly, before he plastered that charming, nauseating grin across his face. He walked up to me later, champagne glass in hand. "Didn't think you'd come," he murmured. "You've got a thing for drama, don't you?" His voice had that calm cruelty I once mistook for confidence. I smiled back. "You should be careful what you call drama, Cole. Sometimes it's just truth waiting for its turn." He smirked. Still the moral compass. Still exhausting. And I swear, as he turned toward the stage, bathed in that golden light, I thought, "You have no idea what's about to happen to you." Arthur was already in place. The file was ready. The show was about to begin. Halfway through Cole's speech, the screens behind him flickered. Then came the emails. His emails. Transfers. Offshore accounts. Fabricated budgets. My name listed as the scapegoat in his internal memos. The room went silent. Forks froze midair. People leaned forward in disbelief. I'll never forget the sound of his voice breaking through the microphone. What is this? Turn it off." But it didn't turn off. Arthur's voice filled the speakers instead. Calm, steady, devastating. "Good evening. I'm Arthur Bennett. What you're seeing is the truth my son has hidden from this company, from our clients, and from me." The entire ballroom turned toward Cole. Cameras flashed. His face went pale as the projection showed his final transfer, signed under his own name. It felt poetic, watching him drown in the very lies he'd built. Arthur ended the broadcast with one line that still makes my throat tighten. "Integrity is inherited, but so is corruption. My son chose the latter." Cole's face went white. His hands shook as the applause that followed wasn't for him, it was for the truth. For once, it was for me. Vanessa's face crumbled. Security approached Cole before he could even stand. I stood perfectly still, watching with calm and collected eyes. Because this moment, the moment when the world finally saw what I'd known all along, was worth everything that came before it. He showed up at my door that night. Rain soaked him through. His perfect hair a mess, his eyes hollow. He looked less like a CEO and more like a man staring at the ruins of his own ego. He banged on my door until I opened it. "You ruined me," he spat, his voice cracking. "Everything I built, gone. Why couldn't you just stay where you belonged?" I looked at him, this man who once controlled my every heartbeat, and I realized something terrifying. I wasn't afraid anymore. You did this to yourself, Cole. He laughed, that bitter, broken sound of a narcissist losing his grip on reality. You were nothing without me. I gave you everything. I took a step closer, my voice soft but steady as a heartbeat. You didn't give me anything. You just underestimated what I already had. He blinked, confused, like he couldn't process that I wasn't trembling, wasn't apologizing, wasn't begging him to understand. And for a moment I pitied him. The man who gaslit me, humiliated me, and made me believe I was small, now stood there, begging for control that no longer existed. Lightning flashed behind him. He looked like a ghost. "Goodbye, Cole," I said quietly, and I closed the door. The thunder outside felt like applause. 6 months later, Cole pleaded guilty to embezzlement and fraud. Arthur's testimony was damning. The company recovered most of the stolen funds. Elise, it turned out, knew nothing about his schemes. She was as much a pawn as anyone else. Vanessa left him immediately. His career was finished. But the real consequence came from something quieter, the loss of his reflection. The narcissist's greatest punishment isn't prison or money, it's irrelevance. Cole Bennett was nobody now, and to a man who'd built his identity on dominance, that was the cruelest sentence of all. Arthur called me into his office a week after the legal proceedings concluded. His hands shook as he slid an envelope across the desk. "You've earned this, Harper," he said quietly. "This isn't charity. It's restoration." I opened it and froze. Vice President of Operations. My name, my title, my worth, finally seen. Arthur smiled, tears brimming in his tired eyes. "My son destroyed the company's soul. You gave it back." I couldn't speak. My throat burned, my chest tight. All I could do was nod and whisper, "Thank you." As I walked out, sunlight poured through the glass doors, warm and gold, catching the dust in the air like glitter. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was walking away from something. I was walking into myself. Arthur passed away 8 months after Cole's arrest. But before he did, he established something beautiful, the Lowell Legacy Fund, a scholarship and counseling program for employees experiencing workplace abuse, named after my father, for people like me who had nowhere to turn. At the dedication ceremony, I stood in front of a room full of survivors, people who'd been gaslit, demoted, humiliated. I told them my story. I told them about my father's letter. I told them that kindness isn't weakness. And then I told them the truth. Revenge doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to break, to quietly gather your evidence, to trust that truth, when it finally emerges, doesn't need witnesses, it only needs time. I went to visit my dad on a Saturday morning in spring. The cemetery was quiet, just the wind moving through pine trees, carrying the scent of rain and earth. I knelt by his grave, brushing the leaves from his name. "It's done, Dad," I whispered. "He can't hurt me anymore. More than that, he can't hurt anyone else anymore." I told him about the gala, about Arthur, about the scholarship fund bearing his name, his legacy, not Cole's. I told him about the message I'd received that morning from a woman named Sarah, someone who'd been in a similar situation at another company. She'd read about my story and found the courage to report her own boss. She was leaving her toxic job to start fresh. One story, one woman finding her voice because another woman found hers first. For a while, I just sat there, the silence wrapping around me like an old friend. Then my phone buzzed. A message from the new CEO of Bennett and Company. "We're proud of you, Harper. The company feels alive again." Tears slid down my face before I could stop them. But they weren't sad tears, they were release. Years of humiliation, swallowed words, and quiet pain finally leaving me. I stood, looking at the horizon glowing in soft amber light. "You were right, Dad," I said. "Kindness isn't weakness. It's just quieter, but it wins." And then I smiled, the kind that starts small, then spreads unstoppable. I walked away slowly, heels crunching on gravel, my silhouette fading into the setting sun. Behind me, the world was finally quiet, and for the first time, so was my heart. They asked me, months later, if I regretted anything. Did I regret accessing Cole's computer without permission? Did I regret plotting against him? Did I regret the deception? The answer is complicated. I regret that I had to fight this hard for basic dignity. I regret that my father didn't live to see me stand up for myself. I regret the time I wasted believing I was too broken to start over. But I don't regret fighting back. And I'd make the same choices again. Because here's what they don't tell you about workplace abuse. It's not always obvious. It's 1,000 small cuts delivered with a smile. It's being told you're emotional when you're grieving. It's being demoted because you chose family over profit. It's watching your self-worth drain away day by day, while the person causing it walks around like they've done nothing wrong. But here's what I learned. The only way to stop people like Cole Bennett is to stop believing their lies about you. I wasn't fragile. I wasn't emotional. I wasn't weak. I was just waiting for the right moment to show them my teeth. My father's last voicemail still plays sometimes, when I need to remember. You've done enough for everyone, sweetheart. When will someone do right by you? Now I know the answer. Me. I will. And that makes all the difference. If you've made it this far, you understand. Respect is non-negotiable. Your worth isn't defined by anyone else's seating chart. Not by who gets the credit. Not by who your family believes first. My story proves that silence can be a weapon and patience can be power. I didn't scream. I didn't break. I just waited for the truth to surface. If this resonated with you, share it with someone who's been gaslit into invisibility. Tell them, your silence doesn't make you weak. Your boundaries don't make you difficult. Your survival makes you extraordinary. You don't need permission to fight back. You don't need approval to start over. You need only the quiet conviction that you deserve better and the willingness to prove it to yourself first. Subscribe and hit that notification bell for more stories about setting boundaries, finding your worth, and turning humiliation into triumph. Because the revolution happens when you decide to write your own ending. Your worth was never in question. It was only ever waiting to be remembered. Now go remember it.